There was a time when these shows were everything. Appointment television, the kind of stuff families actually sat down together to watch. But behind some of the biggest laughs of the 60s and 70s, there were people whose real lives told a very different story. Today we're looking at 10 sitcoms of the 60s and 70s ruined by one disgraced member.
Yeah, me too. And tomorrow's his camping trip.
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking of a new approach.
Number 10, The Brady Bunch, Robert Reed. The Brady Bunch debuted on ABC on September 26, 1969, and for 5 seasons, it sold America a picture of the ideal blended family. Mike Brady was the calm, wise, always present father, steady, dependable, the kind of dad every kid on the block wished they had. Robert Reed played that role with evident skill, but Reed himself was deeply unhappy. From the very first season, he clashed with creator Sherwood Schwartz over what he felt were beneath him scripts. Reed had trained as a serious Shakespearean actor, had starred on The Defenders, and had earned considerable critical respect before the show began. Being stuck in a squeaky clean family sitcom felt to him like a kind of professional sentence. He sent Schwartz lengthy memos picking apart plot logic and dialogue, and the friction between them was chronic throughout the run. During the final season, Reed flatly refused to appear in what became the series' last episode, The Harebrained Scheme. They shot it without him, redistributing his lines. It was a remarkable way to exit a show that had made him famous. What the public didn't know, what most of the country wouldn't know until after Reed's death, was that he was living a double life throughout the entire run of the show. Robert Reed was gay. In an era when television executives wouldn't even allow Carol Brady to be a divorcee, insisting she be written as a widow instead, the idea of the Brady patriarch being a gay man was simply unthinkable. Reed never came out publicly. His castmates knew or suspected, and no one brought it up. Florence Henderson, who played his television wife for 5 seasons, would later say that he was an unhappy person and that had he not been forced to live a double life, much of that anger and frustration might have dissipated. He died on May 12, 1992, at age 59 from colon cancer. His death certificate listed HIV infection as a significant contributing condition. Barry Williams, who had played Greg Brady and known Reed for decades, later said they never once discussed Reed's sexuality despite all those years of close work. Reed had kept that wall firmly in place. For a generation that had grown up watching him play America's perfect father, his death was a collision of 2 entirely different worlds. The warmth they remembered from the show and the private pain of the man behind it. The legacy of the Brady Bunch has never quite been the same since. Not destroyed, but no longer possible to see without understanding what it cost the man at its center.
Rooms to rent, huh?
Oh, yeah. How would you like a nice garden apartment?
Oh, yeah.
Well, go out there and sleep in the crib.
Number 9, Sanford and Son, Red Fox. When Sanford and Son premiered on NBC on January 14, 1972, it was genuinely groundbreaking. Red Fox played Fred Sanford, a cantankerous junk dealer in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles, and the show became one of the highest-rated programs of the entire decade. At its peak, it ranked second in the Nielsen ratings, trailing only All in the Family. It made Fox a mainstream television star after decades of working nightclub circuits with material too raw for network audiences. But Fox had a complicated relationship with the show almost from the beginning. During the 1973 to 74 production season, he walked off the set in a salary dispute, though he cited health reasons publicly. NBC filed a $10 million lawsuit against him. His character was written out for several episodes, with Grady, Whitman Mayo, holding things together in his absence. The dispute was eventually resolved, and Foxx received a substantial pay increase, but the damage to the working relationship was done. In 1977, without informing his co-star Demon Wilson, Foxx abruptly left Sanford and Son entirely, lured away by ABC with a reported record-setting contract to host his own variety show. It lasted less than one season before being canceled. Without Foxx, Sanford and Son attempted a spin-off called Sanford Arms, which also collapsed after a single season. One of the most successful sitcoms of the decade was effectively finished because its star walked out the door. The years that followed grew darker. Foxx filed for bankruptcy in 1983. In 1989, the IRS raided his Las Vegas home and seized nearly all of his personal belongings to recover back taxes owed. When he died on October 11, 1991, collapsing on the set of The Royal Family, his estate had so little left that Eddie Murphy, who had long credited Foxx as a major influence, paid for his funeral. A performer who had spent decades clawing his way to the top of American television left behind financial ruin largely of his own making, and a show that deserved a far better ending than it got.
The man asked me to pass him his coffee, so I did. He didn't catch it, though.
Number 8. Mork and Mindy, Robin Williams. Mork and Mindy launched in September 1978, built entirely around the volcanic energy of Robin Williams. The premise, an alien from the planet Orc adjusting to life on Earth, was slight enough that without Williams, there likely would not have been a show. He received a Golden Globe for the role in 1979, and in its first season, the series was a genuine cultural phenomenon, drawing massive audiences week after week. What those audiences were watching was also in part the product of a serious cocaine problem. Williams was deep into heavy drug use throughout the run of the show, something he would later acknowledge with characteristic directness. The nature of his addiction during this period was not rumor or tabloid invention. His use was visible enough within Hollywood circles that colleagues would describe watching him disappear backstage at clubs and return transformed. His longtime friend Alan Steffen recalled a moment when Williams said he needed cocaine before he could go on stage, not as a joke, but as a statement of dependency. The drug use made Williams erratic in ways that created real strain on Mork and Mindy. He was frequently improvising beyond what the scripts or his co-stars could track, and surrounded by a social world that had few brakes on it. His personal life became chaotic during those years. The show itself began to deteriorate after its first season, partly due to ill-judged production decisions, but the instability around its star was a real and contributing factor. By the time Mork and Mindy was canceled in 1982, the original energy that had made it extraordinary was largely spent. Williams later spoke about this period with considerable honesty. He credited the shock of John Belushi's overdose death in March 1982, a man he had known well, who moved in the same social world, with forcing a genuine reckoning with his own situation. He got sober and rebuilt his career. But the 4 seasons of Mork and Mindy exist with the knowledge that the remarkable talent on screen was being run at a speed and on a fuel that was genuinely dangerous. The show caught lightning in a bottle. It just didn't know, at the time, how close it was to burning down.
I told you what the special was for today. Oh, great. I'll have one to go.
Number 7. Happy Days, Scott Baio. Happy Days ran on ABC from 1974 to 1984 and became one of the defining sitcoms of its era. Scott Baio joined the cast in 1977 as Chachi Arcola, a young cousin of the Fonz, and quickly became a teen idol. The character proved popular enough to earn its own spin-off, Joni Loves Chachi, which aired from 1982 to 1983. For much of the public, Baio remained a fond piece of 1970s and 80s nostalgia, a charming kid from Brooklyn who had hit it big on one of television's most beloved shows. That image changed substantially in January 2018 when Nicole Eggert, his former co-star on Charles in Charge, came forward with sexual misconduct allegations. Eggert claimed that Baio had molested her beginning in 1986, when she was 14 years old, and that, when she was 17, they had intercourse. Another Charles in Charge co-star, Alexander Polinsky, followed with his own public allegations of physical assault and sustained emotional abuse on set. Baio denied the central allegations, maintaining that any relationship with Eggert was consensual and began after she had turned 18. The conflicting accounts were never resolved criminally, but the weight of multiple former colleagues speaking out and the specific nature of what was alleged fundamentally changed how people looked back at that corner of television history. The situation was compounded by what had happened just months earlier. Following the April 2017 death of his former Joni Loves Chachi co-star Erin Moran, Baio had speculated publicly on a radio program that her death was caused by drugs and alcohol. Her autopsy found she had died from stage 4 cancer. Moran had been facing serious personal hardships in her final years, and the insensitivity of Baio's initial comments, made before the cause of death was established, drew immediate backlash. He issued a statement attempting to walk it back, but together with what followed in 2018, he became one of the more complicated figures to emerge from that entire generation of television.
Take my wife, please. Good night, folks. My wife is so fat.
Number 6. The Partridge Family. Danny Bonaduce. The Partridge Family ran on ABC from 1970 to 1974, following a widowed mother and her 5 children touring the country as a family pop group. Danny Bonaduce played Danny Partridge, the wisecracking red-headed middle son, and his natural comedic instinct made him one of the show's most watchable figures. He was 10 years old when the series began. By his own account, life off-camera was already in serious trouble by the time the show ended. He has spoken about physical abuse from his father during the show's run, severe enough that co-star Shirley Jones took him in to live with her at various points. When The Partridge Family was canceled in 1974, Bonaduce had no stable home to return to, and within a short time he was living in his car, broke and using drugs. He has described sleeping behind a dumpster in Los Angeles, still recognizable enough that people would stop and ask for autographs without knowing he had nowhere to go at night. The drug and alcohol problems became severe and sustained. On March 9, 1990, he was arrested in Daytona Beach, Florida, attempting to buy cocaine from an undercover police officer. On the same weekend, he had been hired to host an event for an anti-drug campaign aimed at children. The following year, he was arrested in Phoenix, Arizona, in connection with robbing and beating a transgender sex worker. He pleaded no contest to reduce charges and was ordered to pay the victim's medical bills. Bonaduce has been remarkably candid about all of it over the years. He eventually found stability in radio and settled into a more grounded life. But the distance between the lovable red-headed kid on Saturday night television and the person he became in the decade after the show ended remains one of the starker illustrations of what child stardom without adequate support could quietly do to a person.
Well, this is a democracy. I say we take a vote to see who goes upstairs.
Number 5. Diff'rent Strokes. Dana Plato. Diff'rent Strokes premiered on NBC in November 1978, built largely around the presence of Gary Coleman as Arnold Jackson. Dana Plato played Kimberly Drummond, the biological daughter of Conrad Bain's character. the warm, blonde older sister of the household. For several seasons, she was central to the show's sense of being a genuine family. In 1984, Plato became pregnant at age 18. The production handled it poorly. The pregnancy was written out, her role was reduced to occasional appearances, and she was eventually let go entirely. The decision reflected an era in which teen pregnancy was considered incompatible with family television, and the show made that choice without any real concern for what it meant for her afterward. Unable to find steady work and without the industry support that might have helped her land on her feet, Plato struggled financially and personally through the late 1980s and into the 1990s. In January 1991, she walked into a Las Vegas video store, produced a gun, and demanded money from the clerk. She was arrested, convicted, and pleaded guilty to robbery. The image of Kimberly Drummond holding up a store was a genuine shock to anyone who had grown up watching the show. Her legal troubles continued. On May 7, 1999, Dana Plato died at age 34 from an overdose of prescription painkillers and muscle relaxers. The medical examiner ruled it a suicide. Her co-star Todd Bridges had telephoned her just days before, trying to connect her with a rehabilitation program. She told him she didn't have the problem he thought she did. 3 days later, she was gone.
I'd have a headache.
Wrong. You'd have $2.21.
Number 4, Diff'rent Strokes, Todd Bridges. Todd Bridges played Willis Jackson, the older of the two adopted brothers, across all 8 seasons of Diff'rent Strokes. He was, by the time he joined the show, already an experienced young actor, one of the first black performers to appear regularly on series like The Waltons and Little House on the Prairie, and brought genuine presence to the role. He has since disclosed that during the show's run, he was sexually abused by a publicist and family friend, a trauma with lasting consequences. He began using marijuana at 15, while still on the show. When Diff'rent Strokes was canceled in 1986, the structures that had held his life together disappeared. What followed was a rapid descent into crack cocaine and methamphetamine addiction. He has described moving to South Central Los Angeles, dealing drugs to fund his habit, and moving through a world in which violence was a daily feature. In 1988, Bridges was tried for the attempted murder of Kenneth Clay, a drug dealer who had been shot. He was acquitted after a witness testified he had not been present at the shooting. His defense argued that Bridges had been an exploited child, pushed into an industry that used what it needed from him and left him without the means to survive it. It was not an unfair characterization. He has written about it all with real candor in his 2008 memoir, Killing Willis. From Diff'rent Strokes to the mean streets to the life I always wanted. What the book makes clear is that nothing about what happened to Bridges was inevitable. He was a talented young man badly let down by the people responsible for his welfare, who found his way through it against significant odds. He is the only surviving member of the show's 3 child leads.
To me, happy birthday to me, happy birthday, Jane.
Number 3, Good Times, John Amos. Good Times premiered on CBS on February 1st, 1974, and was immediately significant. It was the first American sitcom to center on a 2-parent black family, James and Florida Evans, struggling to raise 3 children in a Chicago public housing project. John Amos played James Evans Sr. with a quiet authority that grounded everything the show aspired to be. He was its moral center. Amos had a clear sense of what the show was supposed to mean, and an equally clear sense that the writing staff was drifting away from it. The writers were all white at the start of the series, and Amos became increasingly vocal about what he felt were scripts that misrepresented how black people actually thought and lived. His specific frustration was with the growing emphasis on J.J. Evans, played by Jimmy Walker, a broadly comic character whose exaggerated personality and constant catchphrase Amos believed undermined the dignity the show had originally promised. He made those concerns known to producers directly, and he made them known without much diplomatic packaging. In his own words, the writers eventually grew tired of having their lives threatened over jokes. Executive producer Norman Lear called Amos in 1976 to deliver the news. The show had been renewed for another season, but Amos would not be part of it. Lear did not use the word fired. Amos later said the meaning was identical. Rather than recast James Evans, the producers killed the character off. The season 4 premiere revealed that James had died in a car accident while trying to establish a new business in Mississippi. The scene in which Florida, played by Esther Roll, absorbs that news became one of the most remembered moments in 1970s television. Rolly's grief visible and uncontained, and entirely warranted, because she had fought the same battles Amos had and lost them too. She left the series herself before the following season was done. Good Times ran 2 more seasons without either of the actors who had defined it and was canceled in 1979. The show that had promised something genuinely new about Black family life on American television ended as a diminished version of its original ambition.
I'm fine, but why did you call me Mary Ann?
Why did I call you Mary Ann?
Yes.
Number 2, Gilligan's Island. Bob Denver. Gilligan's Island ran on CBS from September 1964 to April 1967, only 3 seasons, though it feels longer because the show lived so persistently in afternoon syndication for decades afterward. Bob Denver played Gilligan, the well-meaning but catastrophically inept first mate whose schemes to escape the island invariably made things worse, and he was so completely identified with the character that it defined him for the rest of his professional life. He kept making appearances as Gilligan well into the 1990s, including at charity events, and he and his wife eventually co-hosted a weekend radio program from their home in Princeton, West Virginia. It was the radio that led indirectly to his arrest. On June 4th, 1998, West Virginia narcotics officers intercepted a package of marijuana being mailed to Denver's address. An undercover officer posed as a delivery driver. Denver signed for the package at the door. Police then executed a search of the home and found additional marijuana and drug paraphernalia on the premises. Denver initially told investigators that his former co-star, Dawn Wells, who had played Mary Ann on the show, had arranged the delivery, implicating a fellow castmate directly. He later reversed course in court, testifying instead that some unknown fan must have sent it. Wells was investigated but not charged. Denver pleaded no contest to the misdemeanor possession charge and received 6 months of unsupervised probation. The arrest carried a specific irony that the press did not underplay. Gilligan had been, above all else, an innocent, a man constitutionally incapable of anything calculated or devious. The gap between that image and the reality of a 63-year-old former sitcom star signing for a drug shipment at his West Virginia door and then initially pointing the finger at a co-star was the kind of distance that changes how people remember a show. Denver died on September 2nd, 2005. The image of the island and its castaways endures. But the story of what happened to Gilligan off that island has a different texture now.
So proud of you. Going off to Hollywood to be a big movie star.
It's only a screen test, Mrs. Carnegie.
Number 1, The Partridge Family, David Cassidy. While Danny Bonaduce's story carries more immediate drama, the quieter and perhaps sadder chapter in the Partridge family's history belongs to David Cassidy. Cassidy played Keith Partridge, the eldest son and lead singer of the family band. and became one of the most recognizable teen idols of the early 1970s. The kind of fame that filled arenas and arrived in sacks of fan mail. By any measure, he was one of the biggest stars that network television produced in that decade. He hated it. Cassidy wanted to be taken seriously as a musician on his own terms, not packaged as the smiling face of a Saturday night family sitcom. He walked away from the Partridge Family when it ended in 1974 and spent years trying to establish a separate identity. The music world received him with indifference. The audiences who kept showing up to his concerts wanted Keith Partridge, and the gap between that character and the artist he wanted to be was something he never fully closed. Over time, alcohol became a serious and worsening problem. He was arrested for drunk driving in 2010, again in 2013, and again in 2014. At his 2014 hearing in Florida, he told the judge plainly that he was an alcoholic and needed help, a statement that was both honest and arrived very late. He continued to perform in his final years, and those who saw him described a man who appeared visibly diminished from what he had been. In early 2017, Cassidy publicly disclosed that he was experiencing dementia. He died on November 21, 2017, at the age of 67 from organ failure attributed to liver disease. His last reported words were, "So much wasted time." Danny Bonaduce, who had stayed in loose contact with Cassidy over the years and had even toured briefly with him, wrote a tribute describing him as a man who never got the life he wanted. The show had made him enormous. In the end, he couldn't find a way to live outside of it. These shows were a genuine part of people's lives. The theme songs, the characters, the living rooms they played in on Friday and Saturday nights. What happened behind the scenes doesn't erase that, but it does change the picture and add weight to things that once seemed light. If this is the kind of history you want more of, hit the like button and subscribe. There's plenty more where this came from. We'll see you in the next one.